Aloha. Welcome to ABLE Seminars sessions. Today we're going to talk about what we call encroachments. And if I ask you, what's the definition of an encroachment? You go, oh, I'm not sure. Well, let's imagine your neighbor has built a fence or a wall or even a house. And when you do a survey, you go, hey, this guy is on my land. And so the neighbor is encroaching upon you. Well, what if you built a wall or a fence or a house and you went over your boundary to your neighbor's property? Then you're encroaching on them. So you're either the encroacher or the encroachee. And you didn't get your neighbor's permission. It was either an honest mistake or maybe a deliberate doing where you're trying to get some land from your neighbor. But typically what happens, if they have done studies, and out of 100 lots that were surveyed, they found that 70% of the land had some sort of encroachment, usually by a wall or a fence. I've actually seen a house that was encroaching onto the neighbor's property by 6 feet, which is crazy. How would you ever let someone else move onto your property 6 feet, but they didn't catch it? So that encroachment was there. So the only way to remove that encroachment is to do what they call an encroachment agreement between the two neighbors. And the encroachment agreement is drafted by an attorney, and they'll say, we recognize that there's an encroachment by either side. So the encroacher admits that they're encroaching, and that they'll agree to maintain that wall or fence of the house that's encroaching by way of this encroachment agreement, and they'll maintain it, and they'll do repairs as needed. If that wall or the fence of the house is ever repaired or removed, then you have to move the encroachment wall away and put it in the right place where it should have been there from the beginning. But until then, that encroachment agreement runs with the life of, not the land, but runs with the life of that improvement that someday will be replaced. Now, we have some walls that are 50, 60 years old, and the owners didn't know that there's an encroachment. So when one of the owners sells a property, there's a survey done, and the surveyor will say, hey, there's an encroachment. And then you find out that, hey, the wall or the fence of the house is encroaching onto the neighbor's property, or they're encroaching on you. So that's called an encroachment agreement. You record that encroachment agreement in the records at the Bureau of Conveyance, and then you have the encroachment for as long as that improvement stays. Now, because 70% of the 100 surveys that were done had an encroachment of some sort, sometimes it caused problems when you try to sell the property or get a loan, and sometimes the neighbors didn't like each other. So the legislature was encouraged to pass a law that said that if they have what they call de minimis structure position discrepancy, which means that if the encroachment is really short and not very big, like a few inches, then they're going to deem it to be not an encroachment, and they're going to let that encroachment stay without an encroachment agreement. So here's the distances that they allow to be an encroachment and not have an encroachment agreement. So if you have an apartment zone, industrial zone, business zone, resort zone, then the encroachment cannot be more than a quarter foot, which is only 3 inches. So that's not very much. But if that wall is encroaching 3 inches or less, then it will not be deemed to be an encroachment. In a residential zone land, the encroachment distance is 6 inches or half a foot. So if that wall or fence goes over to the neighbor's property, or they come into your property 6 inches or less, it is not deemed to be an encroachment. Then if you have agricultural or rural zone land, then the encroachment distance is 3/4 of a foot or 9 inches. So 9 inches or less, not deemed to be an encroachment, no need encroachment agreement. Then if you have conservation land, then the distance is 1.5 feet. So remember the distances, depending on the zoning. If it's apartment, resort, industrial, business zone, 1/4 foot. If it's residential, 1/2 foot. If it's rural or agricultural, 3/4 foot. And if it's conservation, 1.5 feet. And this law was passed because there are so many encroachments and there's so many people that build over the boundary, and it was causing a lot of legal issues with the neighbors fighting each other. And so the state said, we will call this the de minimis structure position discrepancy law. It will not be deemed to be an encroachment. Hope that helps when you sell your property, because you will have an encroachment 70% of the time. Aloha.